much. All right, so first question, not so much a question. I'm just going to assume that you remember Singapore well. You've been down a few times. What do you remember of our city?
Well, many things, and I've been coming to Singapore since I think even the late '80s. So I was one of those artists who, as soon as I started having success with my first album, I asked my record company at the time to send me everywhere around the world. I wanted my music everywhere. It was before the internet, so it was a thing where you had to like get on a plane and go and show people who you were and talk about yourself and play live. And I was really happy that Singapore was one of the many places that was on that list early on. But I just sort of developed a love affair with the fans there. But I also really found myself enjoying Singapore more than most places internationally that I visited. And what I tell people after having visited there many times, and now bringing my wife there, she had never been there before. I brought her about 10 years ago. One of the things that I love the most about Singapore, and I don't know that the locals will necessarily agree with this assessment, but it's what I perceive, is that unlike a lot of places in the world that are so intent upon preserving their history, preserving their buildings, preserving and propping things up, I like that Singapore is all about what's new and keeping things fresh and shiny and beautiful. And there's something to that aesthetic that I really, really love. And I tell people, you got to go to Singapore because it's just one of the most beautiful cities in the world, because they are intent upon keeping it fresh and beautiful all the time.
Fantastic. I think that's a very interesting perspective. I think many Singaporeans, we take that for granted because we live here all our lives. So we never kind of look or think about it that way. But definitely very, very cool to hear you say that. All right. So name of your show in Singapore, Greatest Hits Live in Singapore. When it comes to greatest hits, Richard Marx, you have given us so many. Okay. But when you think greatest hit, one, single, what is the first song of yours that comes to mind and why?
Well, probably Right Here Waiting, because it's the song that, even though I've had many, many hits, it's the song that is like, if I just play the intro, I don't even have to sing. If I just play da, 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 on the piano, even now, 114 years after I recorded it, I can play that song anywhere in the world to anyone of any age, and they know that song. So that, as a songwriter and as a performer, to have even one song that is that identifiable and well known and loved is a pretty wonderful thing, and I'm very grateful for it. But then there are these other songs like Endless Summer Nights and Hazard and Should Have Known Better and Now and Forever, and songs that I've written for other people as well. You know, Dance with My Father that I wrote with Luther Vandross, and This I Promise You that I wrote for NSYNC. I've been very blessed to have had a lot of songs that people know, but Right Here Waiting is probably handed down the most identifiable song with me.
Take us about the story behind the song. What was Right Here Waiting about? What was the what kind of gave you the idea? What inspired it? Was there a moment in your life that you decided to capture and then, write this song?
Yeah, I mean, the majority of my songs come in some way, shape, or form from personal experience or relationships or struggles or what have you. And that song, well, first of all, that song was the easiest song I've ever written. I wrote Right Here Waiting in about 20 minutes.
Wow.
I mean, and that's not uncommon for me to write music quickly. I usually write melodies, complete melodies, very quickly. But lyrics take me a long time because I don't want to just fill in the blanks. I want the lyrics to really be thoughtful and unique, and I try very hard to avoid cliched phrases. And you want to, and the way to do that is to make it more personal. To pretend like you're writing a love letter, or you're writing a letter to yourself, or telling a story in a way that only you can. But I was in the midst of my first world tour, so I was traveling nonstop. I was dating the woman who became my first wife, and who I'm still friendly with all these years later. And it was kind of early in our relationship. And it, again, you know, coming back to like internet and stuff, like this was way before FaceTime or, you know, being able to email or to have sort of instant connection with anyone. So it was still the days of sending letters and phone calls, long distance phone calls that cost a fortune. And so when you're traveling all the time and you're in different parts of the world, you become distant from each other. It makes it very difficult to be in touch. And I was on tour. She was, at the time, she was an actress, and she was making a film in Africa. And so we just we couldn't see each other for several months. And I was really bummed out and felt like maybe there was a strain on the relationship because of the distance. And I felt like it was a little fragile. And I was actually at a friend's house writing a rock song, writing this big rock anthem for my live show with big guitars. And he had to take a break. He had to take a phone call or something. And he had a little electric piano in his garage. And I just sat at the piano and I wrote Right Here Waiting as if I had rehearsed it. It was just like I sat down and just started playing Right Here Waiting. And I started to scribble out the lyrics on it. He had an envelope. I used the back of an envelope and a pen. And it was just sort of like I couldn't write it fast enough. You know, it was just, it just poured through me. And I knew that it was a good song. I was kind of shocked at the level of inspiration. But at that time, I was more of a rock artist. I wasn't really a ballad guy yet. And so this song, which was a very intimate, delicate song, you know, you listen to the record, there's nothing on the record. It's just piano and my voice and some string pads and a little acoustic guitar. That's it. Didn't fit what I was doing. And so I tried to give that song away to Barbra Streisand. And she loved the music, but she said she couldn't record it because she said, I don't want to be right here waiting for anybody, which is pretty funny. And so then it was really just because I had made a demo of it and a bunch of my friends who heard it, everybody who heard it said, oh my God, this is the biggest song ever. This is a smash. And then little by little, I went from being like, I'm not recording that song to, all right, I'll try it. I'll just go in the studio and I'll try it. And it was just I remember the first time I sang it in the studio, the people who were in the room just looked at me and went, dude, you know, this has got to go on the record. And then it was the second single from that album and it just went to #1 in 10 seconds.
Most importantly, your ex-wife, the one you wrote it for, did she like this song?
Yeah, she did. Yes. It was funny because, like we were talking about, I had to send it to her, in the mail. And it took about 2 weeks to even get to her. So I remember getting that phone call and, she was very moved by it, obviously. But yeah, there's something so amazing to be able to write songs for people or songs about circumstances. It's a form of therapy, but it's more importantly, it's a form of communication. Because I'm just like every other, most guys, which is that I can't say that stuff. I can't look into somebody's eyes and go, whenever I'm weary from the battles that rage in I'm not going to say, it's going to be so cringe if I say it, I'll sound like a psycho killer. But if you sing it to a beautiful melody, all of a sudden, it's a pretty powerful way to communicate.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you, I mean, you always been drawn to these romantic themes. Are you naturally a romantic guy?
Yeah, I even when I was a kid, I never went through a girls are icky stage. Like all my friends, when I was 5 years old, I had a crush on Lynn Harwich, who was in my class, and I wanted to be her boyfriend. And I was always taken by like Elvis movies and the way he would woo the girl, and I just wanted to be that. I wanted to be that sort of cool, romantic guy. And so over the years, it certainly did work its way into my music, obviously.
Okay, but still, I mean, sentimental, but still shy at the same time? had to put words
Yeah.
into songs in order to communicate your
Yes,
message?
of course, yeah. I mean, less shy now, but yeah, very shy when I was young. Yeah.
Thank you for, taking us back to the story behind Right Here Waiting. It's interesting to know that you had some doubts about whether or not you were going to go ahead and record it, because that's not the only time that's happened. Many years ago, I think this was probably 2011, 2012, you came down to Singapore. I was at your showcase, and you were just about to perform Hazard. And you talked about how when you first put Hazard together, you also had doubts. You didn't know whether or not, this was going to be a hit. And your wife at the time, walked in, took a listen, and said, you gotta record this, right? And she turned out to be right, turned out to be a huge hit. Now, were there other songs you also had doubts about, which turned out way better than you expected?
Oh, yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't think I've ever had the experience of writing something or recording it and thinking, oh, this is a hit. Now, there's a difference between thinking something's a hit and thinking that something's really good. Obviously, I'm not going to record something or spend money and time if I don't think that the song is valuable and good. So I don't, and that's not even, I don't think it's even really ego. I think it's just at a certain point, when something's good and when something's not good. And for every song that I've written and recorded, there are countless songs that have just been abandoned along the way because I just couldn't figure it out. Like there would be little moments to them, obviously, where you'd go, oh, that's good. And I'd go, yeah, but the rest of that is not good. And I just couldn't crack the code. I couldn't solve the puzzle. There are still songs to this day that I've had sitting on my phone for years, little pieces of melodies or pieces of ideas that I know are really good. I just haven't figured out how to turn that into a real song yet. That said, I've never had the experience of recording something and thinking it was a hit. And it doesn't matter what song you picked of mine, of all the hits. If you said, did you know that was a hit when you wrote it or recorded it, I would say no. And what's cool sometimes, though, is there are songs that will, and I don't know that there's an example of one that's a big hit, but there are songs like, there's a rock song that was a hit for me in the States, only in the States, called When You're Gone. And it was something I recorded for an album called My Own Best Enemy. And Keith Urban actually played guitar on it. And I remember cutting the track and thinking, oh yeah, there's something there, it's good. I thought the song was good. We cut the track and it was like, yeah, I was trying to talk myself into liking it. But I thought maybe it's just not there. And then the more we worked on the track, the more we added and subtracted and just tweaked it and changed it, little by little, it became my favorite song on the album. And to this day, when I listen to that album, and I really love that album, but When You're Gone is probably still my favorite song on that album because I just love that it snuck up on me. The more we worked on it, the more I fell in love with the song that I wrote by myself,
Okay, so, these questions that you have, these doubts perhaps, whether or not they'll be hits, does that only apply to songs that you are writing for yourself to record, or does this also apply to songs that you're writing for other people? Because I'll tell you straight up, one of my favorite 80s rock songs is something you wrote for a girl band called Vixen, Edge of a Broken Heart. I love that song, okay?
Yeah, thanks.
Did you know when you wrote it that it was going to be a hit? Because you were writing it for someone else.
That's a fair question. That's a good question. In terms of especially the broader question of well, does that also apply when you're writing for other people? Here's the real answer. At the end of the day, it's the same answer in that I never know. I really never know, and I always have doubts. But there is a difference between writing, 11 songs for an album and then just waiting to see what people react to, and you still never know. But if I'm asked to, in the case of the Vixen song, their whole first album was done. Their manager was my manager at the time. And he came to me and he said, quote, "We don't have a hit. We've got a really good album, but we don't have a hit. And I need you to write a hit for these girls." And I was like, dude, I'm on tour. I was on my first tour. I was touring, I was playing, 6 nights a week. I said, when do you think I'm gonna have time to write and he wanted me to produce it as well. And it took, like, we had to carve out 48 hours to record and mix that whole song and record. And it was really exciting, but it was a panic. The answer to your question is, I had to believe that it was what they wanted, because when I played everybody just the idea, they all went, yes, yes, that's it. And I also know when a chorus is memorable and catchy, and I knew that was a really hooky, memorable melody. I wrote the lyrics with my friend Fee Waybill, because again, like I told you, it takes me a long time to write lyrics. Fee Waybill writes great lyrics, like in 2 seconds. So we were fighting the clock, and all I had was the title. I wrote the title, I've been living on the edge of a broken heart. And then he just took that and ran with it. And so, yeah, like in the case of the Vixen song, I felt confident that we had what they wanted and that it would be a hit.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. A couple of years ago, it was the number one most listened to song on my Spotify account.
Oh,
for
wow,
the
that's
entire
cool.
year. I loved it. Cool. I love it. Still love it to this day. All right. Now let's go back to the beginning of your career. Okay. At the age of 17, your songs end up in the hands of Lionel Richie. He persuades you to move to LA, do a little work for him. How different do you think your life and your career would have been if not for that happening?
Probably radically. I don't really spend much time thinking about it, because that was just my destiny, you know. If I hadn't, you can go deeper into it. If I hadn't written those particular songs that he liked, if I didn't sing the way I sang at that, because people's voices, you know, evolve, they change. If I hadn't had the experience as a boy singing commercials and growing up in this, you know, recording studio and having pretty good studio skills even at 17, there are so many variables that could have prevented Lionel Richie from even hearing. I mean, you got to remember also, this all happened because I went to high school with a guy who was now at college, and he met this guy in his dorm who knew a guy who knew the Commodore organization, and it was such a fluke that Lionel Richie even ever heard my demo tape. We could also say that could have been the catalyst to get me out to LA to start my career as a background singer, which is what happened. But even after I met Lionel and he hired me to sing background vocals on his first couple albums, I still spent years trying to get a record deal unsuccessfully. It wasn't like Lionel Richie walked me into some label and said, you need to sign this kid. That never happened. He never offered to do that. I never expected him to do it. That all happened separately from Lionel. But those events got me to LA, and it just started the path. So if I really start to like retrace the steps and question it, you go crazy, because, you know, literally it could be a thing where if I hadn't had that for lunch that day, it could have all changed, you know. It's like that old movie
Butterfly Effect
called Sliding Doors.
Right.
You know, your life and your destiny is so fragile, and everything is a whim. Everything is like, you know, like if you had left 5 minutes earlier, you could have been in that car crash that happened on the highway. If you know what I mean, it's like you can drive yourself crazy thinking about the what ifs.
You know, just hearing you say all that, I feel like those would make great lyrics for a song.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Definitely.
There you go. Not a bad idea.
Well, you talk about destiny, you also talk about change, okay? How different is Richard Marx, the artist and the performer today, than he was 37 years ago when your debut album dropped?
Oh, well, I think anybody would tell you radically different. And I think if you don't evolve as a person, I mean, I hope that I'm not the same in 5 years or 10 years from what I am now. I mean, I think that I have always had sort of core values and was raised by parents who instilled humanity in me. But I'm a much better human now than I was when I was young. I think I was always kind. I was always pretty sensitive to other people's feelings, but I was also a little more mercenary. I was way more insecure. I had a chip on my shoulder. You know what that means, right? Where I just felt like everything was against me, and I just had a little bit of an attitude.
And you always
And
have to prove something, right?
yeah, and I was out to prove a lot. I was also very confrontational. Over the years, and this happens, I think, with age. I'm 60 years old now, you know, and if you don't learn to adjust the things in your personality that you don't like, then you're just a fool, you know. You're just, and we all have the ability to change things in ourselves that we don't like. I've spent a lot of time working on it. I've done therapy, and I think I'm pretty open to change. And I think if I can pay myself one compliment, it's that I'm good at apologizing when I should apologize and be sincere about it. And also I'm willing to look at the things even now in myself that need to be adjusted or improved. And I want to continue to do that. The only way to do that is to keep asking questions, keep being curious, keep reading. You know what I mean?
And do you feel like all these, all this evolution that you've talked about in your own personal life is then reflected in your work process, in your music, in your performances?
I guess so. I'm going to be honest with you. You know, that's a really fair question, but I don't relate it to that anymore. Used to be, I would jump to that, you know, and that's how I wrote this song, or whatever. I don't really write that much anymore, which is shocking for me to say. But for the last few years, songwriting has been replaced by touring, where, like a lot of us, is my primary career, is touring and performing. I always put in some new material, and every couple of years I do write an album and put out, like, I'm never going to stop making albums, I don't think. But the act of writing new songs and the passion for writing new songs has definitely waned. And I'll be really honest with you, part of it is that when you've done it as long as I've done it, and you've had the success that I've had, there is no longer a feeling of needing to prove anything. Okay, so that sort of inspiration to do it is gone. But there's also no money in it anymore.
Yeah.
There's no real payoff. Like, I could work really hard on writing songs for people, or writing, you know, for myself, whatever. And the reward, excuse me, still mourning here. The reward for that work is nothing like it used to be. I look at young singer-songwriters who are out there, my sons included. I have 3 sons who are really talented musicians and songwriters. They can't make a living at it. You can't make a living doing that anymore, because of streaming platforms. The reward doesn't, you know, the compensation for that work is next to nothing now. Yeah. Luckily for me, or for people like me who have a catalog of songs that people know, we can tour on those songs for the rest of our lives, you know, as long as we stay healthy. The only reason now that I write songs is because I just want to. And I never know when I'm going to want to. I get people all the time asking me, hey, can we get together and write a song? And I just go, I'm touring. And it's a kinder answer than I don't want to. I don't want to sit in a room. At this stage of my life, I'm going to sit in a room with somebody and work really hard on a song that's going to earn me nothing. Or I could walk on the beach with my wife and enjoy the day. That's what I'm doing these days. Way more.
All right. Okay, just a question that just sprung to mind. I wasn't even prepared to ask this question, but because you were talking about catalogs, you're talking about, you know, making a living, you've got such a big catalog. I see a lot of news these days. It's become a bit of a trend. More and more often, artists, big names from the past, are selling the rights to their catalogs. Mm-hmm. Is this something you would consider doing, or is your music your own forever, the rights? You couldn't imagine selling your catalog for no matter how much money?
I think that to have that attitude is fine. I think I'm always just I'm open to any possibility. I've been approached several times, especially in the last year and a half. And so far, even though sometimes these people throw numbers at you that you go, what? The first question I always ask myself is, how is that going to change my life for the better? Do I need to do that? And so far the answer has been no. The answer has been, I like where things are. I like owning my material. Years ago, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, I went into the studio and I re-recorded all my hits so that I now control those new masters, master recordings. So when a movie company comes and says, hey, can we use this song of yours? I say, yeah, but only if you use my version of the record. And luckily, because I produced all those records and my voice is pretty much sounds the same as it did back then, they sound identical. They sound really, just like the originals. So I think that there's some business moves you can make like that that are very important. As far as selling all the rights and my likeness and all that stuff, the answer is who knows? It would be a conversation that I would have with my wife, because it would affect how we live.
Yeah.
And it would also be a conversation I would have with my sons, because, they're in line to inherit those rights. And, my sons are very pragmatic, though. They would probably go, Dad, take the money.
Of course.
I wouldn't be surprised if they did.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. All right. So, 14th of September, the show, Richard Marx Greatest Hits live in Singapore, organized by Dementia Singapore. Okay, this organization working tirelessly to improve the well-being of those affected by dementia. Do you have any comment on the importance of this work to society?
Yeah, I mean, it's it seems to be, and I might be speaking ignorantly, because I would have to really look up the stats year by year by year, but it seems that we're seeing way more instances of dementia and Alzheimer's than ever before. I think that there's probably, if that is true, if the cases are rising, I think we have to look at what that is, and it's probably an environmental reason. There's so much toxicity in the food we eat, in the things that we touch, in with technology, and we don't know what damage is being done to us until it's too late, right? All these studies that come out, like, oh, don't keep your phone next to your head, like, how many years went by before we were all like this, I think that there could be a lot of reasons for it that can be reversed, hopefully, so that the trend starts to go the other way. Events like these and organizations like this are key to figuring out how to reverse the trend. I haven't experienced it in my own family so far, but I have a lot of loved ones, a lot of people close to me are dealing with it. I've lost count of my friends who has a parent who has dementia, or a grandparent who has dementia. So it seems to be just sort of like everywhere, more than ever. When I was growing up, that was something you heard about, but not very often. And now it's just like constant. So organizations like this and events like this are important to figure out how to make it better.
All right. Well, one final question to ask before we let you go, and this obviously pertaining to the concert that's happening on the 14th of September. What can audiences expect, and do you have a message for your Singaporean fans?
Well, I thought for this concert, I'm just going to lay down on the stage and just
they'll still come, they'll still clap, they'll still roar,
they would,
even if you did that, right?
No, it's like, when we agreed to do this, I got really excited, because it really is one of my favorite places to play. The fans are so fun and they're so great. I'm going to give them, as many hits as I can fit in that show. But it's going to be what it always is, a really high energy, fun. My band is incredible. The camaraderie between me and the guys in my band, and they all sing well. It's a big party, and they've never played with me there, so they're really, really excited to come and play. It's just 4 of us, but man, we make a lot of noise for 4 guys, and it's going to be a blast.
Fantastic. And a message for your fans here in Singapore, Richard Marx fans. Do you have a name for your fans, by the way? I feel like that's a thing these days that a lot of artists have. They have their own pet names or nicknames for their fans.
Well, I mean, I used to joke about it, but the Grateful Dead had dead heads, so I guess I would have dick heads, which we can't. we can't. We can't use that.
All right, what's your message for your dickheads?
Oh, just that I can't wait to see them, and let's continue our love affair on September 14th.
Mr. Richard Marx, thank you so much. It has been an honor and a pleasure talking to you. We cannot wait to catch you 14th of September right here in Singapore.
Thank you. You know what? I do a lot of interviews. You're really good at what you do. Congratulations.
I appreciate it. You are one of my favorite interviews ever.
Thank you.
See you on the 14th. Bye-bye.
All right, take care. Hey, this is Richard Marx, and you're listening to 1FM 91.3 Good Times Greatest Hits.